In this episode, I pilot a new show.
I go beyond the philosophy, and I give you real life application. I am Coach Nino Villa.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of the Ask Coach Nino Villa show. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a disciple of Christ, I'm a husband, a father, and a financial coach. And I happen to talk a little bit about faith and family as well. The premise of this show is me answering your questions. See, I get asked a lot of questions through email or through comments on social media about how I would handle different financial situations. And I thought to myself, instead of just emailing back to that individual person or just responding to that one person's comment, I thought I'd take these questions and start answering them on video for hundreds, if not thousands of others to see who might be in a similar situation as those people. So let's jump right into this first episode.
Bobby asks, if I'm already negative in my account or behind on payments, how do I get caught up and start seeding the envelopes to start following my budget?
Bobby, this is a really big question. And I want to take some time to give you a real practical answer here, because I think too many people ask this same question. How do I get started when I'm broke? And other people, many people might have different definitions of what broke looks like, but let's take this definition of broke. You're behind on your bills. You're trying to get caught up. You're trying to get on a budget. See, I think too often you hear that you need to get on a budget and you got to get your income up and your expenses down. And that's all good in theory, but what about a practical approach? And so when we talk about budgeting, I think it's important that you sit down and on paper, on purpose, in front of you, you do a budget. And that budget has to include what dates you're getting paid and how much you're getting paid on those dates. Now that's the income side of things. That's really easy. The next part is listing out all of your expenses. And I mean every last expense. And it's not enough just to list out the expenses. You have to give your expenses a priority, a sense of priority. And I think the easiest way to do that is to identify needs versus wants. Now, we tend to blur those two words together, and we start to identify things that aren't needs as wants and vice versa. But it's really important that you prioritize your expenses. And so in the needs category, what do I need? Well, the first need you have is that you need to feed yourself and your family. That's the most important thing. You need to feed yourself. The next important thing is shelter, keeping a roof over your head and over the family's head. And so I think the next thing you should list after food is either your rent or your mortgage. After rent or mortgage, then it's about looking at your utilities, specifically the utilities that it takes to run the house. So I mean electric, I mean water, trash if you have that, propane or natural gas, those sorts of utilities. After the roof over your head and the utilities, the next category that's most important would be transportation. So here you might have a car payment, then you have your auto insurance, the gasoline you're using every month, you might have public transportation. So whatever kind of goes into that category of transportation, because you need transportation to get to work. So it starts with putting food on the table, keeping a roof over your head, keeping the lights on, keeping the water running, and then getting yourself to and from work. And after those needs, then you start to list out all of the wants. And whether you agree or disagree, I'm telling you right now, a cell phone, internet, cable, satellite, Netflix, Hulu Plus, gym membership, all of these things are just wants. And so you have to list those out and give those a sense of priority. And the way I do that in my own budget is I list the most expensive, what I call bill or subscription. I list it from most expensive to least expensive. And in that way, I can stare at some of my expenses and start to identify which ones can be eliminated. And I'll tell you, my wife and I started this process. We did just this. We listed out all of our expenses. We did it in this order. We did needs first, in that order: food, rent or mortgage, utilities, transportation. Then we did the want category, and we just listed everything from most expensive to least expensive. And I quickly was able to identify a couple of bills we could get rid of. We didn't need some of these subscriptions we were paying for, so we got rid of the Netflix. We got rid of Hulu Plus. So we identified a couple of the expenses we could eliminate. Some of the other expenses we weren't necessarily willing to eliminate, we could certainly cut back. And so I was looking at our cell phone bill, and I noticed we're paying $156 a month, and I was not okay with that. And so I thought about it, and we were out of contract with our current carrier. And so we decided we were going to switch carriers. And not only did we switch carriers, my wife and I made a very difficult decision to go from having 2 cell phones to sharing a cell phone. And that was a really hard decision to make, but it got our $156 cell phone bill down to about $55 a month. So we're saving $100 a month because we made a really difficult choice, but a very wise choice, to eliminate one of the lines and go with a different carrier who had better rates. So I think it's about identifying which expenses you can get rid of, but it's also looking at which expenses can you reduce. At the time, we weren't ready to get rid of our satellite provider. So I called up the satellite provider, and after about a 20-minute conversation with them, I started that phone call with a bill that was $96 a month every month. And when I got off that phone call, my new bill under new packaging or whatever it was $65 a month. And so I was able to save some money there. And I did that for our internet. I did that for our security company. I did that for our car insurance. I just started looking at all of those expenses that we weren't necessarily willing to give up yet. And I made phone calls so that I could reduce those expenses. So you have to eliminate expenses, and you have to cut back on some of your expenses. And if you're in the negative every month and you're trying to get caught up, that's the first thing to go, is all of these things that are nickel and diming you to death. It's death by a thousand cuts, right? So get rid of some of those expenses. If you find that when you do that, you're still not caught up, you're still in the negative, well, you got a bigger problem, because we haven't even talked about your debt payments every month yet. And so you have to list out all of those. And I would do the same thing. I would list those in an order of priority from balance owed, smallest to largest, and really look at, what kind of debt are you carrying and how much does that cost you every month. And when you're staring at it, when you have it on paper and you're able to look down at it and you can stare at it, now you can start to make some really tough decisions. Again, I would say the first thing you do is you buy groceries and you feed your family. The next thing is you pay your rent or mortgage, you pay the utilities to keep the lights on, and you get yourself to and from work. After that, if there's any money left over, then you have to prioritize what's getting paid and what's not getting paid. And you have to make really tough decisions. And, too often we believe that we don't have choices. Right? I don't have a choice. I have to pay my car payment. You don't have to pay the car payment. You're choosing to pay the car payment because you're choosing that you want to keep the car. You might need to sell the car. You might not be able to sell the car because you're so upside down in the car that maybe you need to just let the car go. And that's a tough decision to make. And I'm not sitting here trying to pretend like that's easy. And I'm not even sitting here saying that's what you need to do. But we cannot continue to believe the lie that we don't have choices. We have choices. Our choices have consequences. And those consequences might be good things happen, and those consequences might be bad things happen. But we have choices. And sometimes we have to make tough decisions in order to try to hit the reset button. So if you're behind on your bills, I would get caught up on the bills at the top of that priority list. So get caught up on your rent or your mortgage, get caught up on your utilities before trying to get caught up on something like a credit card. I know it's going to negatively impact you if you're late or on a credit card, or you decide to let a credit card go, but you have to make decisions about how you are going to continue to live your life. If you're behind every single month and you just can't get any traction, it's time to really look at where you can cut expenses and what are you going to let go of in your life. So great question. It's not an easy one to execute on, but I hope that that gives you some practical ways. Practical ways to attacking that situation and trying to get started on a budget when you're broke.
Multiple people ask, how do you determine how much you should spend on groceries?
This is another great question, and it's obviously one of the ones that when I'm working with a couple or an individual, whatever it might be, but when I'm sitting down with somebody to do a budget, it's one of those questions we have to answer pretty much right up front, because I just gave you the order of priority on the budget, and food is at the top of that list. And so there's a couple of different ways that you can go about determining how much to spend on groceries. I think one of the most kind of like scientific ways would be if you're using a debit or a credit card today to pay for groceries, you could easily go back to your bank statements and look and see how much you've spent on average over the last 3 months. So go back the last 3 months and just kind of see, are you spending on average $200 a month, $300 a month? What does that look like? And so that's one very scientific way, is to go back and look to try to get an average so that you can start to budget for that average. Another way is just kind of picking a number based off of your family size. What I've kind of noticed is there seems to be a correlation. It's not an exact science. It's more of it works out more often than not. But if I work with a family of 5, they're usually spending $500 a month on groceries. If I'm working with a family of 3, it's usually $300 a month on groceries. And so that's not an exact science, but what it basically comes out to is about $100 on average per person in the household. Me and my wife, we budget $400 a month, and we have a family of 4. Now, our $400 a month grocery budget is specifically for food and only for food. So we have another budget category for kind of baby supplies. We still have a little guy, he's 2 right now, and so there's still expenses when it comes to like diapers and wipes and that sort of thing. And so that's separate from our grocery bill. Also, cleaning supplies and other toiletries are separate from our grocery bill. So just food, right? Just food, stocking up the house, we budget $400 a month. And so that's another way that you can kind of determine how much you should be budgeting for food. And I want to add, and I think this is more important than the number itself. Like, it's important that you get a number, but in order to stick to that number, which is the more important point, you got to stick to that number. I would strongly encourage you, regardless of where you are in your finances, whether you have it on lockdown and you're watching this just for validation and reinforcement, or whether you're struggling, it doesn't matter where you are. This category, groceries, is perfect for a cash envelope. It's so vital to sticking to that number that you came up with. It's just too darn easy to swipe plastic. And so you will overspend at the grocery store almost without fail. And so on payday, go to the bank, take out the money. I just told you we budget $400 a month. Excuse me, $400 a month for food. I get paid bi-weekly, so that means $200 every paycheck, and $200 goes into an envelope, and we go shopping on cash. And this has done a number of different things, a number of different positive things for our financial situation and for mine and my wife's relationship. One, it has helped us to stay to that budget. We have cash. If we don't have enough cash, we put things back. We get crazy stares when we're putting a bunch of stuff on the belt, and then we have like a little pile of things that we're not quite sure are going to make the budget, and like they're the first things to go if we go over budget. We also, like I said earlier, we have a different fund for our toiletries and a different fund for the baby stuff. So we actually have 3 different transactions, because we'll put all the groceries on there and we'll pay for those with the cash envelope for groceries. Then we'll put all the toiletries on the belt and we'll pay for those. And so this is, it seems like it's a big pain in the you know what, but really it isn't. once you get used to this and you don't care about what other people think, and you're not worried about other people looking at you and like, what are they doing? And you're not worried about the cashier, like, why are you separating these things? Don't care about any of that, and you just focus on you and your money situation and your budget. This is going to be tremendous help to help you stay within that budget, and you'll shop differently. You'll shop for better deals. You just won't pick up as much for the house, and so you'll come in under budget because you're forced to. If you leave the plastic at home and you don't have that as a backup to pay for groceries, if you don't have enough cash, well, then you have to put something back, and you can't go over budget. It's just the money's not there to do it, and so go to a cash envelope system with your groceries. Figure out what that number is. A scientific approach is to look back 3 months or so. I mean, you can go back farther, but just get an average of what you're spending. A more artsy way of going about it is just dedicating a certain dollar amount per person in the household. And so if that dollar amount's $100 per person and you have a family of 5, you're going to spend $500 on groceries. And that's okay. I want you to hear that. It's okay to spend $500 a month on food when you have a family of 5. This is you and your family we're talking about, and so make sure that you're taking care of your household that way. And it's supposed to be that number one priority underneath the expense category. And so, hopefully that's another very practical way of determining your budget. Look back 3 months if you can. Go with the feel of $100. You can manipulate that number. Maybe it's only $70 per person for your household, whatever it is, but kind of determine it that way, and then go to a cash envelope system, because you will shop differently and you can't go over budget when you only have so much cash. One final tip on how you might be able to prepare for the grocery store even better is my wife puts together the menu before she goes shopping. So she knows exactly what she's buying for the entire week, so that when she goes to the grocery store, she has a very specific list of very specific items that she's going for, and never have a problem staying within budget.
Lisa asks, you're giving away your money before you save it? What am I missing?
This is another great question, and thank you for the question, Lisa. This is completely rooted in my belief system. In the beginning of the show, I told you that I'm a disciple of Christ. And it's by no mistake that I said that first. I said I was a disciple of Christ before saying that I was a husband, a father, and a financial coach. And so because of my belief system, I am a tither. I give first. And I don't give because somebody told me I had to. I give because God's word says that he created us in his image. And so in my mind, that means I have my father's DNA. And I want to be like my dad. My dad is a giver. He's the ultimate giver. He gave his only son so that I could be reconciled to him. And so put all of the kind of the Bible speak aside for a second, and let me get down to the nitty-gritty. So actually, one other Bible reference. So the Bible tells us in Malachi chapter 3 that we are allowed to test God in the area of our finances. And the first time I heard that, I made a decision to test God. And I said, okay, God, I'm going to start tithing and see what happens. And so I have gone through seasons where I tithed, then I didn't tithe. I tithed, I didn't tithe. And tithing, if you're unfamiliar, is just a biblical word for tenth, 1/10. And so God's word says that we should bring 1/10 of our crop to the storehouse so that it could feed the widows and the orphans. And nowadays, we take 1/10 of our income to the church so that the church can use that money to take care of the community at a greater scale than I would be able to do on my own. So I made a commitment to tithe. And I have noticed from my own experience, when I am in a season of tithing and I'm in a season of giving, that my financial situation is much more peaceful. There doesn't seem to be emergencies around every corner. There doesn't seem to be as many things breaking around the house. When I'm in seasons where I'm not tithing, I seem to have financial distress. So even though I have extra money, things are breaking left and right. Bills aren't getting paid that normally get paid. And things just get really stressful and just really weird. Now, that might all be in my head. And it's fine if that's your opinion, that's just in my head. But I'm telling you from my own experience, and I've gone back and forth. So in a moment of transparency, my camera just stopped recording in the middle of my answering of the tithe question. And so I'm going to do a real kind of quick recap. And if you have more questions about it, be sure to ask, because that's the whole premise of the show, right? So here's the recap. First, I give because of my belief system. The Bible tells us that we're made in God's image. I'm just like my dad. I have my dad's DNA in me, so I want to be like him. I want to be a giver just like he's a giver. The Bible also tells us that this is the one area that we are allowed to test God. Malachi 3 tells us that we can test God in the area of our finances. And the New Testament tells us to give cheerfully, to be a cheerful giver, and not to give because we feel obligated to, or because we think that we're supposed to. This is not a salvation issue. You can have the saving grace of Jesus Christ, whether you're a tither or not. And so that's the reason why I give. And because that I've experienced financial peace when I'm tithing, and I've experienced financial distress when I'm not. And so I can't make any promises for you, but I can encourage you that if you want to take that leap of faith, that you can test God, and maybe you do it in small increments. Maybe you start off only tithing 1 or 2%, and you kind of work your way up to 10% over a period of time. Great question. Thanks for the question. Bonus question time.
Where can I download your budget template?
So I get this question all the time. Coach, where can I get your budget template? Like I said before, I have a couple of videos where I've actually done my budget live online, my real income, my real expenses, and in a really simplified spreadsheet. I've had the really convoluted Excel spreadsheets in the past, but I've come to use a simple format that a lot of people are interested in getting their hands on. And so if you're one of those people and you want to get your hands on this simple budget template, I have a link below in the description that you can click on, fill out the form, and I'm going to send you my budget template for free in the email immediately.
How do I ask you a question for a future episode?
You can ask your questions 2 different ways. I have another link down below if you want to ask your question via email. If you want to ask your question via social media, you can do that using the hashtag #AskCoachNinoVilla. So like I said, the whole premise of this show is that I'm going to answer your financial questions, your faith questions, your family questions. And without your questions, I don't have much of a show. So be sure to ask your questions so that I can answer them on a future episode.